The plan was clear. You wrote it yourself. Entry criteria, stop placement, position sizing, exit rules, risk parameters, every detail defined, every scenario considered. You reviewed it before the session started. You told yourself this time would be different. This time you would follow it completely. Then the market opened, and a trade formed. Not perfectly, but close enough to begin the internal negotiation. Price approached your entry level. You hesitated. One more candle. One more confirmation. You entered, but later than the plan described. The trade moved in your direction, then stalled, then pulled back toward your stop. Your plan said hold. Your plan defined exactly this scenario, exactly this level of adverse movement as normal, acceptable, expected. But something else was happening inside you, something louder than the plan. So you adjusted the stop, just slightly, just to give it more room. Price continued lower. No.
Part 1. Knowledge versus execution. There is a distinction in trading that most education completely ignores. The distinction between knowing what to do and doing what you know. These are treated as the same thing. They are not. Knowing is intellectual. It operates in the prefrontal cortex, in the calm, rational, planning part of the brain. The part that wrote the trading plan. The part that can articulate exactly why every rule exists. The part that, in a calm state, would make every correct decision effortlessly. But trading does not happen in a calm state. It happens in a live market, with real capital at risk, with open positions generating emotional pressure, with uncertainty creating neurological activation. And in that state, the actual state of live trading, the prefrontal cortex is not operating alone. It is competing with the amygdala, with the stress response, with the accumulated emotional weight of every previous trade in the session. And in that competition, knowing what to do is not sufficient, because knowing lives in one part of the brain, and execution happens across the entire brain, including the parts that respond to threat, including the parts that seek immediate relief, including the parts that have been conditioned by previous painful experiences to avoid certain actions. The plan was written in a calm state. It must be executed in a pressured one, and the gap between those two states is where execution breaks down, not through forgetting the plan, through being unable to follow it despite knowing it perfectly. Part 2. The neuroscience of plan deviation. Let's go inside the brain, because the moment when a trader deviates from their plan, the specific neurological event that produces that deviation is more understandable than most traders realize, and understanding it removes the self-blame and replaces it with something more useful, a structural solution. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, rule adherence, and long-term decision-making, functions optimally under conditions of low to moderate stress. When stress is low, the prefrontal cortex is fully online. It holds the plan in working memory. It evaluates each decision against the plan's criteria. It overrides short-term emotional impulses in favor of long-term strategic behavior. This is the trader at their best: calm, clear, consistent. But as stress increases, as cortisol floods the system in response to open losses, uncertain outcomes, or the simple pressure of real capital at risk, prefrontal cortex function degrades. Its hold on working memory weakens. Its ability to override emotional impulses diminishes. Its capacity for long-term strategic thinking is progressively replaced by short-term reactive thinking. And here is the critical detail. The plan is stored in the prefrontal cortex. When prefrontal cortex function degrades under stress, access to the plan degrades with it. Not completely. The trader still knows the rules exist. They can still articulate them if asked. But the functional influence of those rules on behavior, their ability to shape real-time decisions in a live market, weakens significantly, while at the same time, the amygdala's influence on behavior strengthens. The amygdala does not know the plan. It knows threat. It knows pain. It knows the need for relief. And its solution to every threatening market situation is the same: do something to make the threat stop. Exit the trade to end the uncertainty. Widen the stop to delay the pain of being wrong. Override the rule because following it in this specific moment feels too dangerous. These amygdala-driven responses are experienced not as emotional reactions, as rational adjustments, as flexibility, as market awareness, as the kind of in-the-moment judgment that separates experienced traders from rigid ones. But they are not any of those things. They are the stress response overriding the plan, and they produce the same outcome every time: deviation, inconsistency, results that do not reflect the strategy's true edge.
Part 3. The moment of deviation. There is always a moment, right before the plan is broken, a specific, recognizable moment of internal conflict, where one part of the mind holds the plan and another part generates the reason to deviate from it. Let's examine what that moment actually looks like. The trade is open, price is moving against the position, the stop level defined in the plan is approaching. The plan is clear. If price reaches this level, exit. No exceptions, no adjustments, exit. But as the stop approaches, something happens that was not in the plan. A feeling, not dramatic, quiet, but insistent. This feels like it might bounce. The structure on the lower time frame looks supportive. One more candle might confirm the reversal. These thoughts feel analytical. They feel like additional information that the plan did not account for. They feel like the application of experience and judgment, rather than the abandonment of discipline. But they are not. They are the amygdala generating narrative, constructing a story that justifies the action it wants, relief from the discomfort of the approaching stop, in terms that sound analytical. Because the amygdala is sophisticated enough to know that the prefrontal cortex will not respond to raw emotion, so it dresses the emotion in the language of analysis, and the result is a thought that feels like insight, but is actually avoidance. Recognizing this, learning to identify the amygdala's narrative in the moment it appears, is the most important skill in plan adherence. Because the moment of deviation is the moment where everything is decided, before the stop is widened, before the rule is overridden, in the few seconds of internal conflict between what the plan says and what the emotion wants. That is where the trade is really managed, not at entry, not at exit, in those seconds. Part 4. Why plans break. The emotional triggers. Let's identify the specific emotional states that most commonly produce plan deviation. The first trigger is fear of loss. When a position is moving against entry and the stop is approaching, the brain anticipates the pain of the loss before it has occurred. That anticipatory pain activates the same neural circuits as actual loss. And the fastest way to reduce that pain is to delay the stop being hit, which means widening it, which means the plan is broken, not from ignorance of the rule, from the neurological urgency to avoid pain. The second trigger is fear of being wrong. For traders whose identity is connected to correctness, a trade moving against them is not just a financial event. It is a potential verdict on their judgment, and exiting at the stop confirms that verdict. The plan said exit, but executing the exit means accepting that the analysis was wrong, and that acceptance is more painful than the financial loss itself. So the stop is moved, the acceptance is delayed, and the loss grows. The third trigger is the desire to recover. When a session has been difficult, when previous trades have created a drawdown that needs to be recovered, every open trade carries the weight of that recovery requirement. And a trade moving toward its stop is not just one loss, it is the distance between the current account level and where it needs to be, growing wider. That pressure pushes the trader to override the plan, to give the trade more room, to find a reason to stay in rather than exit, because the alternative, accepting the stop and being further from recovery, feels intolerable. The fourth trigger is uncertainty about the plan itself. When confidence in the strategy is low, when recent losses have created doubt, following the plan feels like trusting something that may not deserve trust. And in that state of uncertainty, the plan's rules are no longer experienced as reliable guides. They are experienced as constraints that might be preventing a better decision. So they are overridden, not through clear analysis that a better decision exists, through the vague discomfort of uncertainty whether the plan is right.
Part 5. The illusion of flexibility. Many traders who deviate from their plan do not experience it as deviation. They experience it as adaptation, as the application of experience and judgment to a dynamic situation, as the kind of flexibility that distinguishes skilled traders from robotic ones. This reframe from deviation to adaptation is one of the most effective self-deceptions in trading, because it preserves the self-image of a disciplined trader while allowing all the behaviors of an undisciplined one. True flexibility in trading has a specific definition. It means adjusting to genuinely new information that was not available when the plan was written. Structural changes in the market that invalidate the original thesis, news events that alter the fundamental environment, technical developments that change the probability of the setup. When these occur, when genuinely new, objective information changes the picture, adjusting the plan is not deviation, it is updated analysis. But in the vast majority of cases, mid-trade adjustments are not responses to new information, they are responses to new feelings. The new feeling of approaching the stop, the new feeling of uncertainty about the outcome, the new feeling of not wanting to be wrong. None of these are information about the market. All of them are information about the emotional state of the trader. And emotional state is not a valid input for trading decisions. It is noise. Noise that, when acted upon, produces inconsistency. And inconsistency is the enemy of edge, because edge requires consistent application of a defined process, and consistent application is exactly what flexibility disguised as deviation prevents. Part 6. Lessons from professional traders. One principle shared consistently among experienced traders is this: the plan is written by the best version of you. Follow the best version of you. When you wrote the trading plan, when you defined the entries, the stops, the exits, the risk parameters, you were operating in a calm state. Prefrontal cortex fully engaged, no open position creating pressure, no recent loss creating emotional contamination, no urgency distorting assessment. The plan represents your clearest thinking about your edge, your most objective assessment of risk, your most rational definition of what qualifies and what does not. That is the best version of you. And the moment you deviate from the plan under the pressure of a live trade, the moment you override the calm state decision with a stress state impulse, you are replacing the best version of you with a compromised one. Not a wiser version, a more stressed, less rational, more emotionally reactive version. That replacement costs consistency, and consistency is what compounds.
Another principle observed among professionals who have maintained plan adherence across extended periods of volatile market conditions is this: treat every deviation as a system failure, not a personal failure, a system failure. When the plan is broken, the professional does not experience it as a character flaw. They experience it as a gap in their system, a structural weakness that needs to be addressed. Either the plan itself was incomplete, it did not account for the scenario that produced the deviation, or the execution environment was insufficient. The tools, rules, and structures that should have supported plan adherence were not in place. Either way, the response is not self-criticism, it is system improvement. What specific change to the plan or execution environment would have prevented this deviation? That question, asked after every deviation, builds a progressively more robust system, one that makes plan adherence easier over time, not through trying harder, through designing better. Part 7. The real shift. Stop asking, what is the best strategy? Start asking, can I execute consistently? These questions lead to entirely different places. The first question is about finding the right rules. The second is about following them. And in treating, the second question matters more. Because a mediocre strategy executed consistently will outperform a brilliant strategy executed inconsistently. Every time, without exception. Because consistent execution allows the edge, whatever edge exists, to express itself across a meaningful sample of trades. And that expression is what produces positive expectancy over time. Inconsistent execution prevents any edge from expressing itself, because the sample is always contaminated by deviations, by trades that were managed differently than the plan described, by stops that were moved, by exits that were early, by entries that were late. The strategy looks broken, but the strategy was never fairly tested because the execution was never consistent enough to test it. The shift from strategy seeking to execution building is one of the most important transitions a trader can make, because it redirects attention from the external, finding the right rules, to the internal, building the capacity to follow them. And the internal work, though less visible and less immediately satisfying, is where the real edge lives. Part 8. Practical tools for following the plan. Let's get concrete. The first tool is the pre-session review ritual. Not reading the plan, reviewing it actively. Before each session, read every rule out loud. Verbalize the specific scenarios that will test each rule. If price approaches my stop, I will exit. I will not widen. I will not hesitate. I will exit. Verbalizing the rules activate them more deeply in working memory than reading silently. It primes the prefrontal cortex for the specific scenarios that will challenge plan adherence, and primed responses are more resistant to emotional override than unprimed ones. The second tool is the deviation log. Every time you deviate from the plan, every time a rule is broken in real time, record it immediately, not at the end of the session, in the moment. The specific rule broken, the specific emotion present, the specific narrative that justified the deviation. This log does two things. It creates friction around deviation, because the act of recording makes the deviation visible and deliberate rather than subtle and unconscious. And it builds a pattern record, showing which rules are most frequently broken, under which emotional conditions, by which specific narratives. That pattern is the map of your execution weaknesses. and a mapped weakness can be addressed structurally. The third tool is the if-then commitment. For every rule in your trading plan, write a corresponding if-then statement. If price reaches my stop, then I exit immediately without exception. If I feel the urge to widen my stop, then I set a 2-minute timer before touching anything. If I take 2 consecutive losses, then I close the platform for 30 minutes. These if-then statements pre-commit specific responses to specific scenarios. They are written in a calm state, before the emotional pressure that will test them arrives, and they function as cognitive shortcuts in the moment of deviation pressure. Rather than requiring the depleted prefrontal cortex to generate a response under stress, the response is already there, already decided, already committed, requiring execution. The fourth tool is the plan confidence rating. Before each session, rate your confidence in following the plan today from 1 to 10. If the rating is 7 or below, identify the specific concern. Is it fatigue? Is it emotional residue from a previous session? Is it doubt about the strategy itself? Address the concern before the session begins. Reduce size if needed. Implement additional friction tools, or postpone the session if the confidence rating reflects a genuine readiness issue. Because a session entered with low plan confidence is a session where deviation is almost certain, and preventing the deviation starts before the market opens, not during it. Closing. The plan is not the problem. You wrote a good plan. You understand your rules. You know what works when you follow it. The problem is the gap. The gap between the calm state in which the plan was written and the pressured state in which it must be executed. That gap is neurological. It is the distance between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, between knowing and doing, between the best version of you and the stressed version of you. And it cannot be closed by knowing the plan better. It can only be closed by building structures that support execution of the plan under pressure. Pre-session review rituals, deviation logs, if-then commitments, plan confidence ratings. Each of these tools reduces the gap slightly, makes plan adherence slightly easier, makes deviation slightly more visible before it happens, and over time, through repeated sessions of better execution, the gap narrows. The plan becomes more natural to follow. The deviation moments become less frequent, less intense, less convincing, until following the plan is not an act of willpower, it is simply what you do, because it is who you have built yourself to be. A trader who executes, not just a trader who knows. Your growth as a trader begins with self-awareness. The rest follows. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, control your mind.